started. So welcome everybody to this webinar on community campaigning. We're joined by some great people you can see here. Julie from Save the Blean, George from Save Minster Marshes, Sian from Friends of Old Park in Chequers Wood, Helen from Benfield Valley Project, and Mark from Save Swanscombe Peninsula. And they're going to run us through the campaigns that they've been involved in, how they got started, and any top tips that they might have. Now, I know some of you may be joining because there's a threat to a site that you're passionate about in your area, and there might be development proposed and you're not sure what you should do. So hopefully this will be some great insight for you, or you might be part of an existing campaign and keen to get some ideas of other things you might want to try. This webinar, we won't be able to see you during the webinar, but if you have any questions, we're going to take those at the end of all the presentations. So please feel free to use the Q&A box to pose any questions you may have. The session is being recorded, so for anybody that's unable to join us tonight, there'll be the opportunity to view it afterwards. Right, so on that note, we'll kick off, and Julia Kirkby-Smith is going to take us through Save the Blean. Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Right, I'm going to share my screen, and I'll put it on full screen, but I think I'll be there hovering outside. So, Save the Blean. Basically, this has come out of something that was published pretty much exactly a year ago today, where the city plan the district local plan for Canterbury included a site that really hadn't been kind of earmarked before, and there'd been very little sort of public consultation or awareness. But it's this site here where, if you see down in the bottom left, you've got woodland. So that is one big swathe of ancient woodland. And on the right-hand side of the screen, that is another big swathe of ancient woodland. And all around the north of this particular site is the rest of the Blean Ancient Woodland Complex. So it really sits in this kind of strategic wildlife corridor area. And for anyone who lives there, it's teeming with all sorts of, rare bird life, skylarks, all sorts of interesting biodiversity, and it's just a beautiful piece of countryside. So very quickly, concern mounted, and 3 parish meetings in the 3 different parishes took place, and at each one there were 50 people, then the next one 70 people, then the next one 80 people. And we just started out by starting a mailing list. So we just gathered everyone's emails and just tried to get everyone connected. We started using Gmail and then realized sort of GDPR, no, we need to get onto MailChimp and, just do things properly. So we set up our email list. We tried to, just find as many local residents who were available to give their time and energy and skills. And we put together a sort of a committee. So Save the Blean was the name that emerged. We had a big sort of community meeting at the pub one day, and we got our committee of what started out as probably about 12 people and has since grown to, well, at its largest, there are about sort of 20 people on the committee during the major campaign phase. The main campaign was around the consultation period. So this draft local plan came out last year, and we then had 12 weeks. So it was sort of from the end of March through to the very, very beginning of June. And we saw that as a kind of 12-week period where, we would need to kind of work out how to galvanize, firstly, public awareness, and then secondly, public action. And we just wanted to get as many people as possible to feed into that public consultation. But also, that consultation process is quite complex and technical, and we knew that we had to pull out all the key reasons why the site was both not suitable, not viable, but also all of the things that would be at threat if housing was put there. And the proposal, it still is a proposal, is for 2,000 plus houses. And essentially it's a kind of a new settlement or a new town that is proposed for going there. So we started having regular meetings, and initially we just wanted to raise awareness. So our very first thing to do was we got loads of placards and posters printed up. We had leaflets that were double-sided. So on one side it had all the information about what this proposal was, how it had emerged, and how people could kind of take action and get involved. And then on the other side, it just said save the Bleen. So people could stick that in their windows or in their cars. And so that was our kind of immediate thing to get people going. And through that, the placards and the banners just, you know, it gained so much traction that people were then asking, can we have a banner? Can we put something up? We put a banner up outside the University of Kent because it's their land. They're the people trying to sell it for somewhat understandable financial reasons, which, you know, we realise there's a need there, but we say 2,000 houses is not the way to achieve that. But, you know, for instance, the university has a thing that talks about, you know, we stand for community and something and ambition. And so we put one up in a kind of direct response. So don't destroy our community, don't destroy our wildlife, don't destroy our future. We leafleted, so we got lots of those leaflets that were double-sided printed up, and we had a whole horde of volunteers putting them out around the local area. And then we tried to drum up some press coverage. So I'm a former journalist and have not particularly contacts in this area, but kind of knew how to reach out to local, you know, news stations and try to engage people about what we were doing. But we knew that in order to get that press coverage, we'd have to sort of create something that they could latch onto. So the first thing we did was a walk, which was a kind of we posed it as a nature walk, and we just wanted to get people to come and sort of appreciate what was there. And we printed up little quizzes for kids, and we said, bring a picnic. In the end, it was on one of the coldest days in March, and it was really not a picnic day at all. But I can't remember how many people came. I mean, I think it was over 100. And actually closer to the time, we press released it as a protest walk, and we got BBC News to come and cover it. Sorry, we've gone, oh no, then we've got here. Then that was pretty successful, and that really, you know, I think brought it into the public eye at large. But we knew we needed to create that kind of rhythm of different events. So for a bit later on, for the 25th of May, we then went for a more ambitious kind of protest march, and we organised a march to the university that started in Dane John Gardens in Canterbury, which is sort of large public park. We had speakers from Kent Wildlife Trust, and I think we had RSPB there. So we had by then sort of galvanized some really powerful partners who would come and, you know, speak on behalf of nature, speak on behalf of all the reasons why this was not a suitable site, and kind of made it, yes, a community thing, but actually it gave it a bit of gravitas because we had other partners on board. And that march, we had more than 350 people involved, and we banged drums and we shook bells and walked all through the centre of Canterbury and then up the hill to the university, and we delivered a letter that all of our partners had signed, and we handed it in at the registry to urge the university to kind of rethink its plans. That's the poster that we had. That's one of the speakers, yeah. So we had sort of 3 or 4 different speakers kind of rallying at the beginning. And then that's the letter that we handed in, which had sort of like 4 or 5 different co-signatories on it. And it was on a Saturday, so there was nobody from the university there, but we kind of handed it in symbolically at the registry. And this was our most prominent canine supporter. Then further to that, we had our email list, so that has been growing steadily. We've now got about 900 people on our email list. We also set up a Facebook page. We were using that email list to send out regular newsletters. So, I mean, through the main consultation period, they were pretty much weekly or fortnightly. They were pretty frequent, and always giving people information, and then a call to action and telling them what they could do next. So, come to a meeting and find out more, donate to our fundraising page, come and help with leafleting. We were always really clear about what we were asking people to do. And then towards the end of that consultation period, the most important thing was to get people to submit their consultation response. But it was quite tricky, it's quite technical. So we ran a whole load of drop-in sessions where people could come and just sit with someone and talk through what they wanted to say on the consultation. And if they weren't sure about anything, we'd give them a bit of advice about how to do it. We weren't doing it for them, but we were just there to kind of help them navigate the quite difficult form. And by the end of the consultation period, more than 1,500 submissions had been received in response to that development. So that has all gone into the council's kind of decision-making process, or so we hope, and that process is still ongoing. So post-consultation, we kind of had to look at what were our different options. So, maybe we don't persuade the council, we still don't know. Maybe we don't persuade the university, we still don't know. But we are prepared to fight legally. So we have got, we're constantly kind of fundraising. We have got a barrister in mind that we'll be using if we need to try and sort of fight at Reg 19 and then see if we can judicially review. And then, the other option might be we do persuade the council to remove it from the local plan, but because of financial pressure, the university still needs to sell that land and do something. So that is a risk. Or what we hope at the moment is that we can persuade the university actually to retain the land and put forward a different strategy that would give them a similar sort of financial benefit, but do something much more positive than 2,000 houses stuck in the middle of a load of countryside. And that's really kind of what we're working on now. I think this was the sort of key moment where we realised that we were a campaign group, but we needed to be solutions focused. There's no point just saying no, although obviously that poster there says no, but you've got to provide a solution. You can't just sit there and complain and moan and not offer something better. So we began to actually engage the University of Kent executive group with a conversation about what can we do instead? How can we help you to achieve, the aims that you have financially, but to try and look for something else that would work? We're still in that process of trying to bottom out exactly what might be possible. But the idea is that there is a bigger sort of Blean landscape project going on, and that we think the concept that we have would be something that can combine reforestation, green capital projects like biodiversity net gain and wilder carbon, and then sustainable agriculture and other modes of using the land to generate an income that isn't so damaging as housing. So alongside that work with the university, we've also been running a petition. We put that petition on change.org, and we've now got more than 25,000 signatures on it, which is about protecting the ancient Blean woodland as a whole thing. We're looking at actually, I think the City Council is kind of aware that that petition exists, but we're looking at what we can do next to really make them listen to it, and kind of, we'll probably be sort of handing it to them at some point. We also set up an exhibition of photographs. So we ran a sort of competition, or not really a competition, but an open call for people to submit photos. And so many local residents and amateur photographers gave us their beautiful pictures of all the, the nature and biodiversity there. And we turned that into an exhibition, which firstly ran in central Canterbury for 4 weeks. And we did an opening night, which we also press released. We got KTV there to come and film it. And we had more than 50 people there, including city councillors. So it really felt like a moment for people to kind of value and cherish the place and start to think about a positive alternative. So we kind of launched that idea. And the exhibition's now moved to the local church and is there again for another 4 weeks with lots of information and information about the area, the history, the heritage, but also how people can get involved with the campaign. We did a few things that would raise money. Sorry, I will be quick. I've got two more, I think, a couple of things. So we did a pub quiz, which raised over £1,000. We're planning some walks, and we also turned the photographs that we had submitted into a calendar, which we sold. And also that's nice because it keeps it in people's minds. They've got that calendar up for the whole year. There's a picture. And then we now have this alternative vision that we're developing. So this is where we're at this stage of the Blean Biopark. There's lots of kind of detail on these slides, so I'll whiz through them. But it's really about how do we create something that ultimately partners can get behind, the university can get behind, hopefully the city council can get behind. And we're trying to be that kind of solutions focused campaign. So we kind of switched from fighting to funding.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Julia. I know that it's a lot to cover in quite a short amount of time, all the work that you've been doing. That's been great. We're now going to hear from George from Save Minster Marshes, and I'm going to share your presentation, George.
All right.
And if you want to take it away.
Mine won't be as long as Julia's. So I'm George Cooper. I'm the founder of Save Minster Marshes. So we're fighting a campaign to try and get National Grid's Sea-Link project in Kent moved to a less environmentally damaging site. I mean, their proposals are to bring a subsea cable from Suffolk into Pegwell Bay, which will be, if they get permission, to be the third cable to come into Pegwell Bay. They're hoping to direct drill it under the salt marsh and the garage pool, which is a brackish, or was a brackish pool on the edge of Pegwell Bay, and then under St Augustine's golf course to some farmland at the top, then open trench it across the farmland to an area where they propose to build a converter station. So the converter station's going to cover 9 hectares, so that's about 22 football pitches. It's going to have 50-meter tall pylons with cables that are going to go perpendicular across the River Stour. So as you can see by the picture there, you've got the converter station, but you've also got loads of other electrical infrastructure projects. Some have already got planning, some are in planning, and there's lots more that ain't even on there that are proposed as well. So I found out just by chance, I was on the marsh one day and I see 2 fellas doing a bird survey, and asked them what they were doing, and they were doing a bird survey for National Grid. So I phoned my friend up who actually rents the ground where the converter station is, and he told me there was a battery storage, but it actually wasn't a battery storage. The battery storage had all been granted. That's on the old power station site. So I decided to try and make people aware. This isn't really my thing. I'm a carpenter in joinery and I'm a part-time gamekeeper. I'm not, I come out of school with woodwork and art, and I'm not an academic or anything like that. So this is really hard for me. So I started by contacting a few local people that were sort of conservationists and wildlife filmmakers and that. And I was hoping really that they would take it on. I thought they'd be the people to fight this sort of thing, but it didn't really come to that. So I ended up just trying to do something myself, trying to make people aware really, because although National Grid had leafleted a lot of people, no one really knew that it was going on, to be fair, or they didn't understand what the project meant. So I started by emailing as many people who I thought might be able to help, like MPs and councillors and nearly every single wildlife NGO in the country. And I didn't really get a lot of traction to start with, really, because it was just myself, contacting all these people, trying to, make aware of that. And then I contacted the CPRE, which is the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England. And they put me in touch with one of their journalists, David Mayers, and we had a chat and that. And he suggested I started a Facebook page, which was probably the best thing that we could have done, because after we started that, it's just gone absolutely mad and taken over my life. But the CPRE are also part of our steering group, and they've really brought the technical people in, really. Like I say, I'm just a gamekeeper and a carpenter. My role mainly is to record the wildlife on Minster Marshes. So I've been going there for 50 years, and I've been a gamekeeper on Abbey Farm for 28 years. And I always make a note of all the wildlife, because obviously I'm going around the marsh for hours and hours, but just as a personal thing, really. But in 2022, I was seeing a bird. Actually, one bird made me do this. It was a bramlin. So I decided to try and find a licensed BTO bird ringer, because I thought we should be recording the wildlife there. So we started a ringing program up, which has been really successful. And just by chance, it was, this Sea-Link project coming along. It's, fantastic for our project, because it's data that can't be denied. So, where was I going? So, yeah, so we got in touch. All these people were recommended by David Mayers, and we've got some really fantastic people that are, they started the steering group. They're doing all the stuff, contacting the Environmental Law Foundation and all the technical stuff. So we've started off by going to the consultations and printing leaflets out and trying to make people aware of it. And then we contacted all the local fairs and events that were going on through the summer, and most of them, or all of them, in fact, let us put stalls up there so we could display information, banners and stuff like that. And we had, some of our ladies had tombolas, so we could collect funds to pay for the leaflets and the banners and all that. Another one of our members on Facebook started our petition, so that's up to over 16,000 signatures now. We've also got a mailing list of, I think, over 1,000 people. So, as you can tell, this is really my thing. But
that's really great, George. Is it worth just saying where we're at now with Sea-Link?
So it's coming up to being submitted to the planning inspectorate. So it's gone a bit quiet at the moment, our campaign. We're trying to keep it going and keeping people engaged until it's actually presented to the planning inspectorate. And obviously all the work that we've done recording all the wildlife there, and we're trying to discount their consultation. They started off with a public consultation, and then they had a statutory consultation. So we picked holes in their plans, and they put another consultation in. I think they kept changing it all the time. So once it goes to the planning inspectorate, once they've submitted it, then we've got to go through the 300 documents that they're going to present to the planning inspectorate, and then hopefully it's going to be turned down. If not, we've already started a crowd justice fund. We haven't pushed it too much at the moment, because obviously we don't really know how much money we're going to need to fight this. So once it goes to the planning inspectorate, we know we can contact people get them to register for pins. I don't, this, like I say, this isn't our steering group does most of this sort of thing. I spend hours and hours catching birds, going on the mast for 6 hours a night, catching birds and getting the bird ringer to ring them and recording wildlife. And
You're helping to evidence how special the site is, aren't you, George?
yeah, that's my role really.
And I think that's great, because I think what we wanted to showcase is all the different avenues that community groups and individuals have done to sort of get this going. And you kind of started the snowball, and then now you've got others involved that are doing some of the more technical
I
stuff.
think a big
That's
thing is like we've engaged with all the RSPB and Kent Wildlife Trust and that, and we've took people around the marsh because it's all private land with a couple of footpaths. And obviously, we've kept the wildlife a bit quiet there, but now we need to record as much as we can. So, as many people as can, like local wildlife filmmakers and photographers, we're getting them to share all their data with us, because at the end of the day, National Grid are paying for an ecological survey, but it's like insider trading, isn't it? They're paying for this survey. So, we're trying to make sure that we're recording the wildlife as well.
Yeah, it's always good to have your own data to fall back on. That's been great, George.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. And now, Sean, if you're able to join us and tell us about your campaign, please. Thanks.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Great, Sean.
Okay, that's great. So my name's Sian. I've lived in Canterbury for about 28 years and lived in Brussels for about 10 years before that. Over the last 13 years, I've been involved in 3 quite big open space campaigns here in Canterbury. The first was to save a playing field from development. That was the Kingsmead Field campaign, and that took 7 years. It was ultimately successful, but did take 7 years. The second was to protect an area of floodplain in an area of high landscape value, a green corridor, and a local wildlife site from being turned into an extensive car park. That took 2 years and seems to have been successful, but could come back again. So that's one where we have to be very vigilant. And then the third campaign is the Old Park campaign, which I've been involved in since 2021. And I'm here representing the Friends of Kingsmead Field, that was the previous, the Friends of Old Park and Chequers Wood this evening. They were formed in 2021 and gained charity status last year. So where is Old Park? For those of you who know Canterbury, Old Park is just to the east of the city. You'll see the area Julia was talking about in the north, which is the whole Blean area in the north. And to the east, you have Old Park and Chequers Wood, and then the Stodmarsh International Wetlands Site, which is just further to the east of Old Park and Chequers Wood. So you can see the area ringed in red is the area owned by the Ministry of Defence, which forms a large part of Old Park and Chequers Wood. This is a complex site because it has got owned by different landowners. The area in purple is owned by Canterbury Golf Club. The area in pink is the Ministry of Defence. The area in green to the north of the MOD land is the Story Road Community Park. That's owned by the City Council. And there are 2 patches of woodland on the south of the site. The little green area owned by the City Council, and another area of orange, which is owned by Taylor Wimpey, which is also woodland. What's important to know about the site is that a large part of it is a site of special scientific interest. So all of that area that you see in blue is the SSSI. And we'll be coming back to this map a bit later in this presentation, because it's quite significant for a number of different ways. reasons. One thing that's important to realise is that all of that land which was on the golf course is part of the SSSI, and about half of the MOD land is in the SSSI, but all that area in orange is outside of it. So why is Old Park important? It's important for at least six different reasons. Firstly, and secondly, the archaeology and history. It's the oldest excavatable archaeological site in the country, and that was one of the reasons for its SSSI designation. It's had the archaeology department of the University of Cambridge has been undertaking a number of digs over the last few years on to discover to research the archaeology on the site, and they found artifacts, so particularly stone axes that you can see on the left of the picture from our pre-human ancestors, which are over 700,000 years old. And these are probably, they think, the oldest artifacts in the country. On the history front, it's worth noting that because Old Park and Chequers Wood is largely, it's an area of sand and gravel over clay, it creates a natural reservoir. And so throughout centuries, it's provided the water supply to the city because it's got a whole string of springs coming up out of the edge of the site. So the Romans were the first to exploit the water coming out of Old Park and Chequers Wood. And then it became the major water supply to the cathedral and to St Augustine's Abbey. It is also one of the earliest Tudor hunting parks in the country. That's why it was actually called Old Park, because of its, apparently it was one of Henry VIII's hunting parks. And in more recent history, it's had 2 centuries of military history. So it was particularly important to the military during the Napoleonic Wars because it was so close to the continent. But also in World War I, there was a lot of training going on trench warfare on Old Park. And you can still see, if you get aerial photographs, you can still see some of the trenches that date from that time. So that's 2 of the reasons why it's so important. The third reason is its habitat mosaic. It's a really unusual mix of habitats. So I've just put photos of a few of them up here. So you've got the gorse scrub, which is quite extensive. You've got the acid grassland. It's one of the 3 largest sites of acid grassland in Kent, which makes it particularly significant. And again, it's particularly for this reason that it's got SSSI designation. Most of Chequers Wood is ancient woodland. You can see that photo with the bluebells there. It's got a lot of wet woodland, which is also a priority habitat. And that wet woodland feeds into streams and ponds, particularly the big reed pond. These streams and ponds go down and feed the Stour water meadows. So the large photo on the bottom left are the Fordwich water meadows, which are part of the site. It's also very valuable and very important for rare species. So on the top right, you've got the nightingale. It's got one of the highest densities of nightingale in the country. It's also got a population of breeding turtle doves, and Operation Turtle Dove is very active on the golf club with providing supplementary feed for turtle doves returning from migration. On the top left, you've got one of the acid grassland flowers. So acid grassland has a unique community of very low-growing flowers and plants, many of which are exquisitely beautiful if you can see them up at close range. So that's the changing forget-me-not up on at the top left. In the centre, you've got that's the golden saxifrage. You have the opposite leaved and alternate leaved golden saxifrage, which are pretty rare species in Kent, but grow in very wet areas and stunning plants. So they grow in Chequers Wood. And then on the bottom left, you've got the clove-scented broom rape, and it's one of the only inland locations. There are very few places with clove-scented broom rape in the country. I think they're virtually only in Kent now, and the only 2 other major colonies are on the Kent coast. So we discovered this colony just a couple of years ago, and it's It's one of Old Park's surprises, and that is one of the special things about Old Park. It continually brings forward surprises both on the plant front and the invertebrate front. You never know what you're going to find there next. The fifth reason for its importance is its ecological connectivity. As I mentioned when I showed one of the previous maps, it's only a few hundred meters between the Old Park and Chequers Wood Triple SI and the Stodmarsh Triple SI and International Wetland Site. So you can see those three photos there. They're of the first one is actually the Fordwich Water Meadows. The second one is the Westbere Lakes, and the third one is actually the heart of Stodmarsh. And it all forms one connected corridor, or virtually connected corridor, with just a couple of farming agricultural fields in between along the Stour Valley. So from a perspective of landscape and nature restoration, it has absolutely huge potential. And then the final
need to pick up the pace a little bit.
Okay, so and the final reason is that it is so close to dense centres of urban population. As you can see from this map, it's kind of a wedge of green going out on the east side of Canterbury, and many of the centres of urban population have high deprivation, which are on the boundaries. And just to the south will be coming another 4,000 houses. So by the time those are developed, the importance of Old Park and Chequers Wood will be even greater. So the first threat that we had to challenge was the creation of an eastern bypass. 3 years ago, the council, as was then, wanted to build a bypass straight through the middle of the Triple SI. Fortunately, Natural England, as well as ourselves, objected very strongly to that. And then they chose a different route, but still cutting through the ancient woodland of Chequers Wood. We lobbied very hard, and this is one of the ways in which we lobbied. We produced this common position on Old Park and Chequers Wood, which was signed by 14 conservation organisations, some of the big conservation organisations, and supported by 16 local community groups. And what it was asking for or demanding was the protection, the full protection of the Triple SI, the buffering of the Triple SI, and the extension of the Triple SI. I'll move on. We managed, fortunately, the council changed. The new council that came in 2 years ago dropped the proposed eastern bypass, which gave us a little breathing space. But now we have a big new threat, and it's a threat that we have been preparing for over the last 3 years. And that is that the MOD is putting the whole of its site up for sale. This is how it's depicting the area. So it's divided it up into 3 areas, areas A, B, and C. And it's basically saying it's for mixed use. Only a small patch for housing, they're saying. Area C, that's down in the bottom. Area A in particular, it would be very difficult for it to develop the Triple SI in any way. That's on the right-hand side. But all the area in the left that was outside the Triple SI, it is pushing, if it can do, for solar or battery storage or green energy of one nature or another. So what are we doing? All those areas, as I say, those areas in orange, this was the map you saw before, which are outside the Triple SI. Over the last few years, we've been doing a lot of ecological recording with local experts and documenting all the plant life, insect life, reptile life on these areas 1, 2, and 3.
1 more minute, please, Sian.
Okay, we've developed an action plan. This is some of the actions that we've been taking. I'll just jump through to the next. You can probably just skim read those. One of the most recent ones is we're putting in for an application to Canterbury City Council for asset community value site for the whole site, status for the whole site. We did this last year. They accepted it, but the MOD challenged it. And Canterbury City Council rescinded it. So we took legal advice, and we're now putting in a fresh application. And if this is accepted, and it will give us 6 months if we need to to try and garner the money for the community to put in a bid for the site. We are hoping that the City Council itself will put in a bid, but we don't know that for sure. And so finally, our next steps, Heather will be pleased to say, and this is almost the final slide, we'll be submitting our Asset of Community Value application tomorrow. We have a campaign meeting on Monday, this coming Monday. We're drafting a new leaflet. That was our old original leaflet. And the new leaflet will be a lot about the campaign and about our big fundraising drive. Because all of this, as all the other campaigners will know here, does take a lot of money to run a successful campaign, especially when you start going down the legal route. And then these are just some of the campaigning tools that many of them have been mentioned by the other campaigners that have spoken already. So I'll jump over that one. And finally, if you want to find out any more about Old Park and Checkerswood and the campaign, we've developed a website over the last few months. It brings together a huge amount of information that we've gathered over the last few years about the site, about its flora, its fauna, its habitats, its archaeology, its history. Yeah, it is a fascinating source of information. And yep, I think that's probably it then, Heather.
Fantastic. Thanks ever so much, Sean. Just such an interesting site and all the work that you've been doing there to protect it. Thanks for that, Sean. And next we'll go to Helen from Benfield Valley Project.
Hi.
Hi, Helen.
Hiya. Sorry, I'm gonna share my screen.
If you're able to.
2 moments.
Brilliant. Take it away, Helen.
Okay, so I'm going to put time on myself so I don't run over because I know I'm going to. Our project is slightly different to others purely because it's an urban site. It's very much wedged in the border between what's called Hangleton, which is West Hove. So I'm in Brighton and Hove, so obviously slightly outside of Kent, but hopefully what I talk about will be useful. So it's between Hangleton and Portslade, and it's very much an urban site. And I'm just going to kind of talk through what it is, why it's important to us, and how we've sort of gone about building our campaign. So this is just a little bit about the Benfield Valley. You can see on the map here on the left-hand side, it's a strip of land. It's known as the last green lung in Brighton and Hove. Obviously, Brighton and Hove is a very built-up city. There's not many of these spaces that exist. It's an area of social deprivation, which kind of boosts the value of it because it's really important to have access to that green space. We've got a kind of a real array of mammals, birds, reptiles, including dormice living in the valley. There's a bit of a history to it. So you can see at the bottom, there's a Sainsbury's that's there. So Sir Tim Sainsbury, when he bought the land, once the Sainsbury's had been built, he then gifted the freehold to the then Hove Council. But then they decided to sell on a lease to essentially land developers. And the lease is about 250 years long, which makes it really hard to do anything with, really. And it's kind of passed from developer to developer to developer. Any application that's been put in previously has always been rejected. And the reason that, I'll talk about the reason we exist. I'll just run through kind of some of the things that are there, just to kind of contextualize it a bit. So it's a mosaic landscape. It's got grassland, it's got scrub, it's got woodland, which is home to many different things like our reptiles. We've got mammals, as I said, including the hazel dormouse. We've got some amazing footage of our dormice kind of nesting around the site, which is really lovely. We've got badgers, hedgehogs, so all sorts of things which are at threat, but also very rare to see in a city environment, especially the dormouse, of course. We've also got a really vast array of birds because of its proximity to the South Downs. A lot of those birds will come into the valley and use it for nesting or just passing by. So there's loads of reasons why the Valley is a really important space and worthy of saving. There's a bit of so this kind of shows you a bit about the current leaseholders. So they've had the lease for probably about 10 years now, maybe a little bit longer. And they've allowed fly tipping, they've allowed all sorts of things to happen. And part of our activities have been encouraging people to come and do litter picks. We've estimated that we've cleared probably around 2 tons of rubbish from the site, including half a cast iron bath and a plastic bag from Charles and Diana's wedding. So that kind of gives you an idea of the scale of the fly tipping that we were sort of dealing with when we first started our work. So just to give you a bit of a insight into how we came about. So I was on a WhatsApp. I'm in a WhatsApp group in my children's school. Someone shared a link to a petition that was set up by a local councillor, and it was talking about, at that point, this was in 2020. So Brighton and Hove City Council were putting together their city plan part 2. Part 1 had already been approved, and a link to a petition was set up. And then, as seems to be the trend, I got really annoyed and was just like, why is this such a small thing? Why does no one know about this? So I didn't mean to set up a community group. I just thought, right, I'm just going to set up a Facebook page, which again is a really common thing, just to share images of the valley and just kind of raise awareness of the fact that this was going to happen. I then started to talking to the local councillors. I started talking to other conservation groups in the area and just tried to find links and tried to find out more information about the valley, whether anyone was looking after it, because it's leased. The council are kind of like, well, it's nothing to do with us. They will cut back the hedges and they will make it safe because there's a path that runs through the middle of it, but that's kind of it. So I was very much looking at, like, who is already looking after this site? Are there any conservation groups? Because there's Benfield Hill, which is on the other side of the A27, which is it's a designated nature reserve, but no one was really very interested in the valley. I think because I know a lot of people in the community kind of saw it as a wasteland, because it was just sort of sitting there and people would walk through it to go to work or take their dogs for a walk, but nobody else really knew about it. I also joined the Brighton Downs Alliance, which is a collective of local ecologists, other community groups. I then wrote an open letter, which I put wherever I could. And, at this point, it was still really small. It was just like, I'm just going to try everything. And then I met Carla and Kayla, who kind of just gradually sort of came on board because I put something out on Facebook saying, I want to set up a constituted community group and I need people to do it with. They came and we set it up, and then we set up our petition. We started running events. We then attended the City Plan Part 2 hearings with the inspector to represent Benfield Valley, and there was the 3 of us, 1 person from Sussex Wildlife Trust, and about 10 representatives from the leaseholders. So we're talking lawyers, ecologists, all paid for by the leaseholders. And there was like 4 of us trying to speak up for the valley and talk about what we knew about it. I put in an application to present a deputation at the planning meeting, but that was rejected. And we were told we're stupid for even trying to well, actually, one of the councillors said we were foolish to even think that this was something that we could prevent, essentially, was putting it on the city plan. So we started to build up our campaign. We started to invite people to come along to on-site protests. My pictures aren't showing, which is really annoying, because we did a similar walk to what the Blean group did, and we had a big on-site protest, and we got like 200 people down there walking along the site. But unfortunately, the Benfield Valley was included in the city plan. It was signed off, and so it was designated a space for housing. And we were told, in order to save the 95%, we have to build on the kind of 5%. And we then took a bit of a step back from public campaigning because we really wanted to build the idea that, you know, we wanted to get people to love the valley. And so we set up community nature days, nature walks. We do a lot of work with schools. Things then sort of started to move on, and the local elections were coming up. All of the councillors in the local area put Benfield Valley at the top of their list of promises. And that was huge for us because obviously no one really knew about it before Benfield Valley project came along. And then we got to the point where the councillors were saying, if you vote for us, we'll work to save the valley. Oh God, sorry, my presentations do something really weird. This is the problem when you try and make it look fancy. We also, the project was actually included in, I don't know if you, Kate Bradbury, but she's written a book called One Garden Against the World. Our campaign is in the book. She mentions it in there, which is very cool. And this last year has been the hardest because we were informed very, very kind of like out of nowhere that the lease was about to change hands and that a development proposal was imminent. The group Hollybook Homes, they contacted us for collaborative meetings. So we went to 3 of these, and then we let them know that we weren't going to attend any further meetings with them because there's a clear conflict of interest. They wanted to talk to us in order to be able to say that they had the community on their side. And they wanted us to actually help plan the development, and it just got to the point where we were like, we actually can't do this anymore because we're going against everything we're fighting for. They organised a community meeting with lots of boards up to try and get feedback. Feedback was overwhelmingly negative. The people who were their PR company said they've never had, they had to type everything up by hand. And they said to us privately that they had never had such a response from a campaign, from a development proposal, and that they were staggered by the amount of negative responses that they had. We also set up lots of blog posts. We had a community meeting, which is the picture here, to try and inform local residents of how they could respond, what they could say, what points they could bring up to be considered. And right now, the planning committee, where they will decide whether to accept the plans or not, is on the 2nd of April. At 2 p.m. and we're organising another town hall gathering. We are putting together a dossier of evidence which we'll be giving to the planning committee. We've also previously engaged with the planning committee. Once the new administration came in, I sent an email to them and basically said, these are all the things that we've done, and this is why Benfield is really important. The picture you can see here is an art project we're currently planning to kind of, because we want to do something a bit creative that's not just turning up and writing letters and whatever it is. We want to do something a bit more creative. I'm going to be delivering a speech on behalf of local residents, because you can do that. You can apply to the council to make a speech. We're also creating a plan for alternatives, and we're also in the process of changing legal status to a CIC. We also applied, which I forgot to mention, but we applied to have the whole site designated as an asset of community value. They've designated sections of it, but not all of it. So we are actually still asking them why. And then on Tuesday evening, this is going out tomorrow, but the council have written a letter to the developers essentially saying that if their plans are approved, because the city council is sorry, I know I'm running over. Because the city council is freeholders, the leaseholders have to apply to the freeholders to get the terms of the lease changed. So currently the terms of use are recreational, and they have to apply to have it changed to residential. The council, we didn't know this, we were only told on Tuesday evening that they've written a letter to the developers saying that should they submit, because they haven't yet, should they submit a request to have the terms of the use changed, they won't be approving it, which basically means even if the plans are approved, the council won't approve the change of the terms of use. So we're that was really amazing to hear. However, we're you know, we want to make sure it's not performative. We want to make sure that this isn't something that they'll go, oh, well, you know, look what we did, but then the planning committee decided it. So we're trying to find ways of like holding them to account because they've said they're going to do this. But we've kind of, it's one of those things where we've been burnt before. So we just need to make sure we're not just going, yay, and then, oh, everything's saved. We have to still keep going. So I thought I'd just write a few points of like, this is my last slide, second to last slide, of what to do if you're thinking of setting up a campaign, because I've been doing this for 5 years now. We've been building and building. We're still a really small committee, and loads of my pictures aren't showing up, so I apologise. Get on social media, find a way to celebrate your space, get people to love it. That's such a big thing for Benfield Valley because it was so unloved and it was so full of rubbish. People just thought it was just, oh, just build on it, get rid of it. But once we started posting videos and pictures and doing all of our events, it really started to kind of boost its image, basically. It was a bit of a PR campaign. Reach out to and make links with anyone and everyone you can think of who might be able to help. Unfortunately, you can't see the picture, but the picture that was there was a photo of me with the head of council and then another councillor who actually ended up, who was a bit doubtful about the whole thing, if I'm honest. He's the one that ended up putting together the letter to the developers saying that they won't change the terms of use on the lease. So just make links, just talk to everybody. Anyone that you think might be able to help, just contact them. Have fun organising fun events you think will serve to connect people and showcase why your space is so important. So schools, youth groups, community groups, over 50s group, whatever it is, just like get them into the site, get them engaged. Nature talks, online stuff, like make them really accessible so everybody can join in, and find a group of like-minded people who will contribute and support each other, because that is the most important thing. And finally, please don't give up. Where is it? Please just keep going. We need as many people doing these campaigns as possible, and there are so many examples of spaces that have been saved because of these community campaigns. We don't know what the outcome for ours will be, but we've made so much, we've done so much, and we have made a positive impact. And, you know, that letter that's been sent to the developers, I honestly believe that that chain of events from when we started is the thing that got that letter there. If we'd never have done anything, we'd be halfway to having housing development on there. And all we've done is engage the community and get them to see why it's so important and get them in there. So yeah, I'm going to stop now because I've run over and I apologise.
Thanks, Helen. I know everyone's so passionate about their sites and their campaigns. It's really hard to stick to time, but thanks, some really great advice there.
Sure.
Great. Mark, are you still with us? Are you able to join us and just run us through Swanscombe?
I think so. It's all really inspiring. Okay. Share. Right, can everyone see that?
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay, so this is Swanscombe Peninsula, triple SI now. You can see it here on this plan. So you can, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but you locate Swanscombe marshes. You can see it sticks out into the River Thames.
We can see your cursor.
You've got Dartford there, and it really is on the doorstep of London. So it's on the Thames, 17 North Kent, 17 miles from east of Westminster and east of the House of Parliament. And you see it's surrounded by Northfleet, Gravesend, Dartford. So it's a bit of nature that's surrounded by lots and lots of people. A very important green space, and it's got a long industrial legacy. So it's mining and industry and all that sort of thing has been going on there for a long time. And that geographic and historical use has created some incredible habitats. So you've got wet reed swamp, scrub, rejuvenating woodland, although less of that because of the historic uses. The soil isn't that good; it's quite thin. Dry reed beds, rank grass, and a really important one, which is open mosaic on previously developed lands. There's lots of that, and the succession to woodland is kind of prevented from that, and so there's a lot of the species richness comes from that. So it's a habitat mosaic next to Thames at 650 acres. So one of the main things about this site, well, it got designated a triple SI in 2021, and invertebrates is one of the key reasons why. It's got 1,700 different types of invertebrates. I think it's got a third of all the deep beetle species in the UK. The one everybody's probably heard of is the jumping spider, but that's just this. I mean, great, the jumping spider, but that's the one that the media has kind of zoned in on, and that's only a tiny bit of it. So yeah, loads of incredible, and it's the invertebrates is by virtue of its location on the River Thames, so it's next to the water. It's got a microclimate. It's quite warm along the Thames. It's got an amazing array of breeding birds. So yeah, all those you can see: cuckoos, greenfinch, marsh warbler, grasshopper warbler. So some really incredibly rich bird life, including the marsh warbler. So it's only 8 pairs breeding in the UK. That's really good conditions for marsh warbler. Chetty's warbler. So Swanscombe, BTO are very active at Swanscombe, and it's got 8% of the total UK population of Chetty's warbler. That's what they've worked out. So Swanscombe Peninsula was notified as a triple SI for 3 different species assemblages. 1 was the invertebrates, 2 was the breeding birds, and 3 was the plant life. I haven't got any slides about the plants, unfortunately. But yeah, when we went to the Natural England board meeting, there's a unanimous decision to designate it a triple SI. Natural England are now, unfortunately, coming in for some stick politically, but it was designated a triple SI due to its scientific kind of tests that were met. Unfortunately, the other thing about Swanscombe is it's really close to Ebbsfleet Station, and for some bizarre reason, it's not greenbelt, whereas everything else sort of in that circumference around Kent is greenbelt. And so it's a very attractive location for sort of reasons you can understand for development. And so London Resort, which you may have heard of, it's been described as UK's Disneyland. I say it came along, it's been around for a long time, since 2014. Right, I can't read my own slides because the Zoom thing's in the way. I need to move that. So yeah, so London Resort is supposed to be a world-class theme park. It's what's called a nationally significant infrastructure project. So same as Sea Link, which is these major projects, and they're authorised not through the Town and Country Planning Act, but what's called a Development Consent Order (DCO). And in the world of DCOs and infrastructure, it had been described as a conveyor belt to consent, and the first 100 DCOs since the Planning Act came in 2008 were all sort of waved through. Now there have been some, the success rate has reduced since then. But anyway, as soon as planning permission was granted, investors were primed to basically pile in with loads of money to build this thing. I think it was 2.5 billion was the quoted amount of investment it's going to be. So 500 acres, allegedly thousands of jobs, even though actually it would have compulsorily acquired over 100 existing businesses. The reason it's so problematic is that it would have destroyed over 240 acres of triple SI. So on the left-hand side, you can see the green is the triple SI. That's Swanscombe Peninsula triple SI, and the red would have been the area that, at the risk of using kind of loaded terms would have been literally would have been concreted over, and the green, what's left, would have been very fragmented. And where the main impact is to the north of the site, which is where the wildlife is at its richest, although all of it is actually important to Triple SI. And it would have been a scale of habitat Triple SI destruction not seen on a scale in a generation, at least not since the 90s. So yeah, it was pretty significant stuff. So Save Swanscombe Peninsula, there's actually one final thing I'll say about that. The reason that London Resort were actually slightly hung by their own petard, because Natural England were focusing on Thames Estuary, because so much development's happened there and so many important wildlife sites have been, and because of that microclimate and the unique kind of habitat that's around the Thames Estuary. But London Resort was slightly hung by their own petard insofar as they've been doing environmental surveys since 2012 or 2014, and it was the evidence from those surveys, which they were obliged to do, that made people realise just how valuable this site was for wildlife. So bird watchers have been going down there since God was a boy, but it was that scientific evidence that really brought it home, because a bit like some of the other sites that people have been mentioning, there was a perception that there's fly tipping, some parts of it's got pylons on it, some parts of it aren't quite what you could call quintessentially beautiful, although, well, I think they are, but anyway. So Save Swanscombe Peninsula started on Facebook. So for administrators, so Laura Eady, who's a councillor in the Green Party, Donna, Karen and myself. So successes really built up very quickly on Facebook. Campaigned and got BBC and ITV to withdraw their support from London Resort and their intellectual property agreements with them. Got lots of celebrity backing. I think one of the things that we were a key part of, particularly Laura, was political engagement, and we ended up with support from Dartford MP and the new, who was a Conservative, and now Jim Dickinson, who's the new Labour MP, leader of Dartford Council, and cross-party commitment to protect the Triple SI. Ultimately, recognition of the Triple SI in Dartford, the Dartford local plan. One of the reasons it's an NSIP is it crosses two council boundaries. So it was Dartford and Gravesham. Dartford's Conservative, Gravesham's Labour. Gravesham have been, should say, more problematic in terms of they were very, very supportive of the development. And another success, we were able to get traction through the DCO process and representations with the planning inspectorate, and we became, well, I think we were quite an important stakeholder in that DCO process. So, right, I've got to move my thing again, bear with me. Campaign strategy and tactics. So it didn't start from, there's no silver bullet or magic wand. So we developed momentum over time, and it ended up that we were, a serious organisation with a kind of a specific role that was different from the other environmental NGOs like the Wildlife Trust and BugLife, who played, brilliant part and were instrumental in getting the Triple SI designated, but didn't quite have the community outreach, and so therefore we had a USP, if that makes sense. So amongst the four of us that sort of headed the campaign, we've got complementary skill sets. So Karen is very active and prominent in the local community and great at getting community engagement. Donna knows the wildlife, previous campaign experience, and has like the Midas touch with media contacts. She also has the Midas touch with tweets, and she's brilliant at tweeting and getting engagement that way. Laura is fantastic, just generally engaging with people, but particularly politically, she's Green Party, but able to build cross-party support. And then I know about DCOs and planning and the legal side. I think one thing that really helps is that as administrators, by luck, really, maybe. Got a very friendly and collaborative working relationship, and nobody in the group tries to dominate or push the decision making in any particular way. And I think it's very important to remain on good friendly terms. So some tactics. So social media, which is, I don't really like social media, but it's invaluable in terms of getting outreach. Cross-party political support, as I've referred to. The bird ringer. So this is Terry Hilston. You can see here, very active, and it was really helpful whenever we brought people that we want, like celebrities or community people or whoever it might be, politicians, out to the marsh. It's always great to get them to see the bird ringers, to actually see kind of conservation in practice and release a bird. Politicians love it because it's a great photo opportunity. Teamwork. Am I running short?
Yeah, if we could try and sort of wrap it up a bit, that'd be
It's
great.
my last slide. So teamwork with the NGOs, traditional media. Tried not to get sidetracked by other campaigns who, as worthy as they are. Positive message. So we put out an alternative vision. So where is London Resort now? So DCO application had been submitted on 31st of December, so New Year's Eve, because they were going to run out of time on an option agreement they had. They withdrew their application in March 2022, and we, along with many others, were kind of part of the reason that they had to withdraw, because we were lobbying the planning inspectorate. They were taking too long to submit their application. Dartford local plan was adopted in April 2024, which enshrined the SSI as part of planning policy. January 25, High Court ordered London Resort to liquidate the company. So huzzah, with victory. However, the NSIP designation still remains. So it's always possible that another developer could come along and try and piggyback it. Peninsula is currently being sold, and there are definitely housing developers interested. And recently our Prime Minister added the jumping spider to his list of newts and bats and blockers that he doesn't approve of, and that is all about Ebbsfleet Garden City and the SSI. So we don't quite know whether that's smoke and mirrors or whether actually the SSI is under threat. So we're thinking what our next move is. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Mark. That was really great. Just before I know we're slightly running over, or considerably running over, but I think everyone's just got lots of really interesting things to say about their campaigns. Just before we go to answer a few questions, I would just like to highlight that quite a number of people suggested setting up a website as part of their campaign. And so I would just highlight the Planning Networks for Nature. I think most people on this call are probably aware of the Kent and Sussex Planning Networks for Nature, because obviously that's where this webinar is from. But as part of that, there's lots of really great resources and information about some of the campaigns that you've heard today, as well as other ones. But there is also the opportunity to set up a campaign space on there. So rather than potentially investing resource and time into setting up a bespoke website, there is the potential for setting up your own campaign space where you can share resources, attract people to the threat and the site that you're interested in. And if anyone's interested in setting up a campaign space around a site that they're looking to protect, we do have some fantastic volunteer administrators on the network that can help people do that. So I would just highlight that. Now, if all the speakers could turn on their cameras so we can see you all. I think I've stopped sharing screen now, haven't I? Excellent. So we'll just go to, I know there's several questions that were posed during them. I know people have been answering some of those. I think one of the questions that you've already answered, which I know is relevant to Sian and Helen particularly, is around the asset of community value. I think it would be useful just to kind of quickly run through that for anyone who's not noticed your response to that. So Sian or Helen, if you'd like to just give us a quick.
I don't mind. So you can apply to have a space designated as an asset of community value, and it was actually a planning officer that, a councillor on the planning committee who suggested that we do that when I contacted them. So you can probably just go to your council website and search for it. You then make your case. There's like a list of, I think, like 4 questions or something that you need to answer. It's good if there's a group of you and you submit the map, what it is you want to be designated, why, like what, that sort of thing. And it essentially means that for us, it's that should the lease go on sale, that group have the option to raise the money. I think it's about 6 months. It might be longer. I think it's only about 6 months you get to raise the money and try and buy it. So yeah, it's just a way of getting a piece of land into community hands, if you can show that it has value to the community.
Fantastic. I think that's really, really useful, and something probably others might want to explore. There was a question around ancient woodland. Julia, are you able to just quickly? It was Ray. I'm not sure if Ray's still on the call and would like to come in and ask his question.
I think Ray's question, let me find it again, was ancient woodland has such a high level of protection that it's difficult to reconcile the planning proposals at Blean. I mean, yes, it does, in that you can't destroy it, or you shouldn't destroy it, and the Blean also has a number of triple SIs and other kind of designated areas. But yeah, I think where you're not, I think the argument is that this land is not right next to the woodland. There is a bit of a kind of border around it, and the university and its agents are kind of arguing that any of the impacts from this 2,000 house development would not affect the woodland. But, a lot of that comes down to arguments about modelling for air pollution, modelling for impacts. So now you get into the really sort of technical nitty gritty, and you need to get the traffic modelling and the Jacobs reports and so on and so forth. So yeah, some of that is really tricky. But in Canterbury, at least, there are some very, very clear policies written into the local plan documentation around protection for biodiversity and protection for the Blean ancient woodland itself. So, we're arguing to the councillors that actually putting any kind of development there would contravene their own policies. But this is where you kind of have to know the ins and outs of the planning detail to be able to kind of argue these points.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ray, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. It's basically that there are conditions of proximity to ancient woodland that come up in a lot of biodiversity surveys to do with just any sort of planning. And I can't remember the distance now, but it does seem quite a distance. I've had to argue that there are roads and things in between these distances, that we're not allowed to do things, in terms of trying to protect the site.
Yeah, I think there is ancient woodland buffers, but obviously I suppose the areas we're talking about are quite big, aren't they, Julia? Thanks for that question, Ray, and for coming in. I know there's quite a bit of questions and potential tips. Philip Jones, would you like to come in with, you had a couple of other recommendations that you wanted to highlight.
I hope you can hear me.
I can, yes.
So I found this community planning alliance on Facebook, and in turn they put me on to the Environmental Law Foundation. This is with regard to trying to save a green space that was being allocated for housing within the Horsham District Local Plan, and certainly getting some legal advice to help present your arguments in a way that would cut the mustard with a local plan examiner was very helpful. And in that context, you're surrounded by KCs and stuff. It's still a very intimidating environment, and still it's the KCs that get the lion's share of the airtime. But it was very helpful to have the reassurance that you are speaking with some authority, that you've got some on legal issues. So I just wanted to recommend both of those. I guess in general terms, although on a much smaller scale than has been presented today, getting as much evidence to support your case, like we got some bat surveys, ancient tree inventory and so forth. Don't know whether that is going to carry any weight, but all that kind of thing, which was kind of mentioned by all your presenters today, I think is a key part of trying to build that evidence base. So I still haven't worked out how to stop councillors and others from just ignoring the evidence you provide. So that'd be an interesting one for your presenters to talk about. Perhaps we've even had Green MPs voting to put housing over an ancient woodland. So
yeah,
things can get a bit odd at times.
Absolutely, but like you say, all that baseline data so you can evidence how important these sites are is critical. But would anyone like to come in on that point that was just raised around how do you get elected representatives to not to ignore the evidence that's being collected or the value of the site? Would anyone like to come in on to answer that? Any tips? Helen, do you want to come in?
I can. I only volunteer myself because I feel like I'm constantly talking to councillors. I do it by annoying people in the most pleasant and friendly way possible. So when it got to the point when it was really clear that people were starting to actually really like the space, or they were sort of saying, oh yeah, I've always loved it too, or there was sort of a sense of like a building campaign around it. I then started using that with the councillors, saying, oh, come to our event. I kept inviting them down, and then I would then talk to them at that event, and we would talk about all the data that we were collecting, the fact that we submitted things to the Sussex biodiversity records and all of this sort of thing, and almost like not making friends with them because they're not your friend, but just becoming very friendly with them and just trying to get them into anything that you do and try and involve them, but also making them see that actually their position is at threat if they don't support you. And that sounds really manipulative, but that was the reason that we got our thing on their manifestos, on their list of priorities when they were going for local elections, was they realised how many people were behind us, and therefore the councillors don't want to be unpopular. They want to keep their seats, and they want to be seen to be supporting the thing that most people seem to want, and also making the case for it doesn't solve the housing crisis to build on green land. You need to be looking at other ways of, more creative ways of doing things. Sorry.
Brilliant, thanks Helen. And that's probably a top tip in terms of reminding those that are up for election why some of these sites are important, and asking them what they would do with them. Would anyone else like to chip in on that? Or if not, I'll go to the final question from Caroline. Excellent. So Caroline was just asking, Caroline, let's see if you're still on the call. Yes, you are. Are you... not sure if Caroline's able to unmute herself. I'll read a question. There are, she's compliments to everyone. They're all great campaigns, and she's really keen to, if people could share their petitions and links, so that we can kind of spread the word. On that, we will be doing a follow-up email with the recording of this event for anyone that had to drop out or didn't manage to attend who signed up. And as part of that, we can include any of the links to the campaigns or live petitions as part of that. So that will be coming to you. And we will also make sure that that all goes up on both Kent and the Sussex Planning Networks for Nature, and the recording of that this event will be there as well. So I'd just like to extend a really big thank you to all of our speakers tonight. Really hats off to you. You know, all the work that you've put into trying to protect these sites is just fantastic, and I think a real great inspiration to anybody else out there that's looking to trying to safeguard a site that they care about and is threatened with development. Thanks ever so much.